Right now, as you watch this video, billions of data packets are crossing the planet at the speed of light, through undersea cables, through satellites, through the air around you. The internet is so woven into everyday life that imagining the world without it feels almost impossible. But it had a beginning, and that beginning was not a Silicon Valley startup or a tech visionary with a grand plan. It started with fear and a satellite the size of a beach ball. On October 14th, 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the world's first artificial satellite, into orbit. It was small, it was simple, and it beeped, but that beep sent shockwaves through the United States. If the Soviets could put a satellite in space, they could put a nuclear warhead anywhere on Earth. American military and scientific leadership was suddenly and urgently facing a terrifying question. What if a Soviet strike destroyed the central communication hubs that controlled the US military? That question, how do you build a communication network that can survive a nuclear attack, is where the internet was born, not in a garage, in a moment of Cold War panic. The United States government's response was swift. In 1958, President Eisenhower signed the order creating ARPA, the Advanced Research Projects Agency. Its mission, make sure the United States was never caught off guard by technology again. ARPA brought together the brightest minds in science and engineering and gave them money, freedom, and a mandate to think far ahead. It was unlike any government agency before it, deliberately unstructured, risk-tolerant, and obsessed with ideas that seemed almost too ambitious to be real. Most of what ARPA funded looked like science fiction, some of it became the modern world. In 1962, a psychologist and computer scientist named J.C.R. Licklider wrote a memo at ARPA that most people have never heard of, but that changed everything. He called it the Intergalactic Computer Network. In it, he described a world where computers all over the planet were interconnected, where anyone could access programs and data from any location, where knowledge was shared freely and instantly across distances. It was 1962. Most computers filled entire rooms, cost millions of dollars, and were used by a handful of specialists. And yet Licklider described, in remarkable detail, what we would eventually call the internet. He never built it, but the people who did build it were, almost without exception, his students and colleagues. The vision came first, the engineering followed. The single most important technical breakthrough that made the internet possible was an idea called packet switching, and it came not from America, but from Britain. The old model of communication worked like a phone call. You established a dedicated line between 2 points, and that line stayed open for the duration of the conversation. It was reliable, but it was also fragile. Destroy the line, and communication stops. Donald Davies at the August National Physical Laboratory proposed something different. Instead of one continuous connection, break data up into small chunks, packets, and send each one independently across whatever route was available. They DP reassembled at the destination, destroy one path, and the packets simply take another. It was counterintuitive, it was brilliant, and it is still exactly how your messages travel across the internet today. On October 29, 1969, a student named Charlie Klein sat at a computer at UCLA and tried to log into a computer at Stanford Research Institute, 350 miles away. The two machines were connected by a new experimental network called ARPANET. He typed the letter L, it arrived. He typed the letter O, it arrived. He typed the letter G, and the system crashed. The first message ever sent over what would become the internet was low. It was supposed to be login. It is hard to imagine a more perfectly accidental beginning. Within weeks, the bugs were fixed, and ARPANET began linking universities across the United States. By the end of 1969, there were 4 nodes on the network: UCLA, Stanford Research Institute, UC Santa Barbara, and the University of Utah. The age of the networked computer had begun, quietly, without fanfare, in the middle of the night. As ARPANET grew, engineers started using it for something its creators hadn't planned, sending messages to each other. In 1971, a programmer named Ray Tomlinson wrote 2 programs, one that could send a message to a file on a computer and one that could retrieve it. Then he had a simple idea: what if the message could go to a file on a different computer? He connected the 2 programs, sent a task message to himself, and invented electronic mail. To address the message, he needed a symbol that would separate the user's name from the machine's name. He looked at his keyboard and picked the sign, a symbol that, until that moment, was used almost exclusively by accountants. It was, by his own description, not a significant invention. He was wrong. By the early 1970s, there were multiple computer networks around the world, but they couldn't talk to each other. Each network spoke its own language. The internet, as a concept, required a universal language that any network could understand. In 1974, Vint, Cerf, and Bob Kahn published a paper describing exactly that. They called it the Transmission Control Protocol, TCP, later paired with the Internet Protocol, or IP. Together, TCP/IP created the rules that govern how data is broken into packets, addressed, sent, received, and reassembled. TCP/IP didn't just connect computers, it connected networks of computers. It was the architectural foundation upon which every website, every email, every video call, every stream song would one day be built. And it is still the foundation today, essentially unchanged, more than 50 years later. As the internet grew, a new problem emerged. How do you remember where everything is? In the early days, computers on the network were identified by numerical addresses, strings of numbers that had to be memorized or looked up in a printed directory. In 1983, the domain name system was created. DNS is essentially the internet as phone book. It translates human-readable names like Google.com into the numerical addresses that computers actually use. It seems like a technical detail, but it asks the reason you type a word into a browser instead of a 12-digit number. It asks the reason the internet became accessible to ordinary people and not just engineers with photographic memories. For 20 years, the internet had been a tool for scientists, researchers, and military personnel. It was powerful and it was growing, but it required technical expertise to use. The breakthrough that brought the internet to the rest of humanity came from a physicist at a particle physics laboratory in Switzerland. Tim Berners-Lee at CERN wanted a better way for scientists to share research documents. In 1989, he proposed a system built on three things: HATL, a language for creating documents, TTP, a protocol for transferring them, and URLs, a way to address them. Together, these became the World Wide Web. On August 6th, 1991, Berners-Lee published the world's first website, a plain page explaining what the web was and how to use it. It was the last day the internet belonged only to specialists. Within a decade, 1 billion people were online. Within 2, half the world's population. The network that began as a defense against nuclear war had become the largest, most connected communication system in human history.